Griffin, you grew up in New Jersey. You described it in the book as the ghetto. Those are your words. And then you received a lacrosse scholarship to a $65,000 a year private school. You declined college. Instead, you spent 6 years in the Navy as a search and rescue swimmer. You leave the Navy, you become a police officer in Virginia Beach. I didn't realize that's the largest city in Virginia. You guys were busy. You were precinct 3, bunch of Section 8 housing. We're going to get into some of that work. And then in around 2014, you go undercover. You're in New Hampshire, working for the Attorney General's team, the HIDTA team, Task Force DEA, and others. And then in March 2017, you sat in your truck with a suicide note. In a plastic bag, you had your Glock pistol by your side, waiting until midnight to pull the trigger. You named your book The Journey to Midnight. It's a memoir about your life. I really appreciate you being here, Griff, because I said to my wife, I think I read something like 30,000 GWAT soldiers have killed themselves, and only 7,000 died in combat. And so the suicide is an epidemic. And in my experience, there's so many people who talk a big game, about it in policing, chiefs, command staff. But I wanted to talk with an officer who's been through it. Because it's such a huge deal.
And that's it. There's so many people that are in this space and that are talking about it. But if it's been a foundational item in conferences and in boardrooms and and C-suites between chiefs and deputy chiefs. But the suicide rate has stayed the same over the last 5 years, and that's the problem. That's a problem. And so when you take a look at it, something that we're doing isn't working. And it's a shame. I mean, military, 22 veterans a day take their own life. In law enforcement, I think it's, we average between 150 to 250, law enforcement officers a year, and that's a shame. It's a shame.
So, Griff, I asked you to fly here to Greenville, South Carolina, come to our office. And I know you came in last night. We couldn't meet because you were with your kids and got in late last night. I recognize, this is a huge sacrifice for you to leave your family and be here. And also, I'm going to ask you to relive some really terrible moments in your life. And so I appreciate you coming here and doing this. I know it's going to be tough. I want to start with a gift. I was thinking about, in the book, you tell a story about taking the family out for steak. And I have 4 kids like you do, and I know they eat a lot. And I was thinking about, if I were Griff, what would be helpful, meaningful.
Man, you give me emotional out of the get-go, man.
I want to buy a steak dinner for your boys, man. When you spend some time with them, I want you to tell them that I said their dad did a lot of good work.
Yeah, that gets me emotional. I remember how shitty we can curse, right?
Yeah,
I remember how shitty I
course.
felt, not being able to afford anything, and not being able to do anything for my boys. And I think I've told the story or I wrote it in my book about eating somebody's sandwich and how I felt, and I think that was a carry-on from not being able to take my children out to dinner. And here I am out with thousands of dollars in my pocket, getting to do all these different things and driving my cars and meeting with different people, whether it was dinner or strip clubs or whatever it was. And then I go home on a successful night on a Friday and I'm like, let's take the kids out to dinner. And she says, we can't afford that. We can't afford to take the kids. I'm like, it's Longhorn. It's only a couple $100. Let's go have some dinner. Let's celebrate a successful week. And I just remember how that kind of sat at me, and I always say I think that was kind of the switch between me liking C.J. Davis more than I liked Matt Griffin, because C.J. Davis got to do whatever he wanted, whereas Matt Griffin had to remember that he was a husband, he was a father, and all the responsibilities and the things that come along with that I wasn't able to do. So this means the world to me.
You got it, brother. I'm going to put your book up here so folks can see it.
Awesome.
And I'm going to turn off my phone here because I don't even have any more notes that I need to look at. Griff, tell us about growing up in New Jersey. What
Yeah.
was that like?
Yeah, so I love Jersey. You know, I'm always going to be a Jersey boy at heart, whether it's Taylor ham, egg, and cheese, or you know, growing up outside of the city, or you know, saying the word water, because we're the only people in the country that use water, and we call it water. But yeah, I was one of 6 kids. Mom and dad were married for 50 plus years, and I grew up in you know, a side of the town that, you know, I say it's a ghetto. There's probably a lot worse ghettos out there, but for me, it was just there's a lot of different cultures, and so I grew up on the basketball court. I grew up on the sports field. I grew up outside, and you know, it's a different day and age in that era. You know, you went home when the street lights came on, and when the street lights came home, you went home for dinner, and both my folks worked, and they worked hard to put whatever they could on the table, and you know, and I was a good athlete, and I was a big boy. I was a big, strong kid, and 8th grade, I was playing lacrosse. I'm playing lacrosse, and I'm scoring a couple goals on this defenseman, and there's a guy in the stands, and he, you know, heard my dad cheering for me. He goes, "Is that your boy out there?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "What's he going to do for high school next year?" My dad said, "Well, he's going to go to Morristown High." And he said, "Well, has he ever thought about going to Morristown Beard?" My dad said, "Nope." And so that guy's name was Finn Wentworth, and he was a part owner of the Brooklyn Nets and career philanthropist and Morristown Beard alumni. And he said, "I'd love for Matt to go to Morristown Beard." And my dad chuckled. He's like, "Well, that's $65,000 a year, and I don't make that for, you know, all of my children." And he said, "Would Matt be interested in going to Morristown Beard if I paid for him and create a scholarship for him for 4 years?" And I remember that night I came home, and I didn't know any of this until I got home for dinner. My brothers and I, we sat down and we had dinner, and you knew like something was up, because usually like you ate dinner and you were gone, like because you had a couple hours left of sunlight, so everybody was gone. And they came back to the table, and that was my first clue that something was up. And I took my plate up, and I started to leave, and I heard, "Matthew." So I went back to the table, and my dad said, "You know, what do you think about going to Morristown Beard?" I said, "I don't think anything of it at all." I said, "How come?" I said, "It's just, you know, why would I? I don't really like those kids. Those kids in Morristown High didn't really get along. One's public school, one's private school. These are the elite of the elite. I mean, this is the higher echelon of private schools. And they, for the most part, those are kids that made fun of me, or, you know, were chanting, you know, 'You're going to work for us one day,' you know, in the stands when you know, at ice hockey games and lacrosse games. So why would I want to go there?" My dad said, "Well, you're being offered a scholarship to go there for 4 years." I said, "Well, I've got no interest in going there, Dad." I said, "So you can take that scholarship and you can do something with it, man. I want to go play high school ball with the guys that I've grown up with." And I mean, again, we had good teams. We had good football teams. We had good lacrosse teams. We had good basketball teams. So I didn't want to start all over again. I knew all of these guys, and so my brother called me back in, and we started talking that night. And he said, "Man, this is an opportunity that you can't pass up." You know,
Older brother wisdom.
yeah.
Yeah.
He said, "You can't pass this opportunity up," and that's how.
So you go to school with a bunch of rich, fancy kids, and start learning how to pretend.
Yeah, call it my first undercover op, right? My first undercover operation, and I learned very quickly what was important and how you had to act and how you had to move. And
I want to ask you a question, and it was like in the pages of your book here, and I thought about it a few times because I've experienced like deep humiliation in high school, and anybody that does in adolescence, it can change you, changes your psyche. Something happened because I read the sentence where you said you didn't even tell Kendra, your wife, about this.
Yeah.
Your parents, they found an ounce of weed.
They did.
In your dresser.
Yeah.
And they sent you to a 30-day rehab.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about how that must have made you feel with all these rich kids, and suddenly your ass gets sent to rehab for weed. All these kids are blowing coke and doing other drugs. Tell me about that experience.
Oh, man. To this day, it's one of the toughest things, scenarios, parts of my background to talk about. There's still a lot of shame. There's still a lot of stigma around that. And so basically what happened is, you know, here and there I'd smoke weed and had a half ounce or an ounce in a little outdoor type of like area that it was like in a briefcase. And my mom found it, and I came home one day and she holds up the bag of weed, and I was like, was like, yeah, it's marijuana, Mom. I'm a lacrosse player. And I remember her saying, well, I want you to make a decision. I said, okay. She goes, choose your drugs or choose your family. Now, my parents were old school, worked real hard, every dollar mattered. I mean, just blue collar. I said, sure, okay, choose my family. You can throw it away, you can flush it down. What do you need me to do? She goes, well, if you choose your family, you're going to rehabilitation. I'm like, I don't need, it's weed. And she's like, nope, we already set it up and you're leaving tomorrow. Time out. I said, what do you mean leaving tomorrow? Like leaving school? She said, yeah, you're leaving school and you're going to go get some help. And when I tell you I was, at first, like I'm trying to calm myself down. I'm trying to, rationalize. I'm trying to negotiate. Like I don't need that. I'm trying to explain and get out of it, if that makes sense. But then once I realized that this was happening, it was like, man, I can't believe this is happening to me. I'm being recruited to play, college lacrosse. I've got the world in front of me. I'm the senior class president. I've got straight A's. And here I am driving off to a place called Clearview Lodge in Pennsylvania. And I remember just looking out the window as I drove there, and I'm like, I just can't believe my luck, my life. You know what I mean? And it's just and I think everybody can relate to this. You work so hard to get to a certain place, and then something happens that you never foresaw, and it just cuts you right in half.
Griff, I use the word humiliation because it's such a powerful feeling, and it forges you, especially if it happens during those years.
Yeah.
And I think that you must have felt for the first time ever shame and disappointment.
Yeah.
And we're going to go into the book, where these other feelings emerge. But I read your book and I thought that's probably the first time I felt that.
One of the biggest, and to this day, probably one of the biggest aspects of shame in my life and humiliation in my life. So many people that looked up to me and wanted me to, my brothers, I felt.
But it's expectations, Griff.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about something that's now legal in so many states and viewed as recreational and viewed like alcohol.
Yeah.
But I know that it forged you.
Yeah.
And especially when you went to Clearview, one of the reasons why I think you were such a good undercover agent, because you developed empathy for drug users. And I don't think you would have been able to do that if you didn't go to rehab for 30 days in high school.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something that I don't know that I told anybody, but I became, in the time that I was at Clearview, I became like maybe I did write it in the book, I can't remember, but like I became like the spokesman person for all the people there.
Of course you did.
Yeah. We had, about a week in, we had a group session. And I figured like, all right, cool, like so we're sitting out in a circle, and Joe Z started messing with a guy named Lewis. And he was like, man, Lewis, I feel like Lewis was getting ready to leave rehab, and Josie was kind of giving him a hard time. Like, I feel like you're going to relapse. I feel like you're going to be back here because you haven't been, doing the things. And so I'd chirp up, and I'm like, man, give him a break. And the moment I said it, and like when somebody turns and looks at you, and you're like, uh-oh, it's not what I should have done. And he just turned, like he's talking to Lewis, and then all of a sudden he just turns and looks at me. And it's one of the first times I had fear. And he got up and he started walking towards me, and he grabbed me by the ear and lifted me up. And I mean, he just said a couple words. I don't even remember what they were, but I just sat back down. That weekend, Lewis was released from rehab, went home, and on Monday we got word that he overdosed and died. And I remember how that hit me. Right here I was standing up for this kid, but I didn't know best. And Josie knew best.
Josie knew it wasn't a game.
Yep. And I was playing a game and he wasn't. I was playing the game of let me get people to like me.
He's trying to save lives.
Yeah, he was trying to save lives. Yep. And I was a blocker inside of that. And I remember just saying to myself, like that's a man that I want to listen to, and that's a man that I want to be like.
Griff, so you decide to skip college.
Yep.
You decide to stop playing politics with fancy rich kids.
Yep.
And now you're back to the Navy where you can compete.
Yep.
Where it's just objective, black and white.
Yeah.
Your performance matters.
Right.
Nothing else matters.
Black and white.
So black and white. You're attracted to the Navy. So you do 6 years. You do search and rescue.
Yep.
Tell me about some of the lessons that you learned, because I suspect they saved your life.
Yeah. So search and rescue school was probably one of the toughest things I've ever done, but one of the most rewarding things. When I graduated from SAR school, I felt like I could run through a brick wall. So we had somewhere around like 100 people start, and I think we graduated 19. And you get 2 DQs. What that means is a disqualifier. So if you don't pass, if you disqualify yourself from a certain aspect, you got rolled out, or you can ring the bell and you can go home. And so day like 2, I got my first DQ. So when you're swimming inside of a pool that we're at a timed swim, and you got divers underneath the pool, and you have a wetsuit on, you got a carabiner and all your stuff. What people don't realize is that when you have a mask and a snorkel, you're pulling air, right? So you're not, when you get gas, say you do a wind sprint, right at the end of that wind sprint, you're like, that's normal breath work. But when you have a snorkel in your mouth, you're pulling that oxygen. And I know it doesn't sound right, but anybody that imagine put on a gas mask when you're completely gassed out, right? All you want to do is take that gas mask out and suck in air. So unbeknownst to me, when the divers, as I'm humping trying to make time, grabs my carabiner and dunks me underneath the water, fills up my snorkel with water. My first reaction, the initial reaction, was to pull it out, and that's exactly what I did. That was a disqualifier. You're never allowed to take your mask and your snorkel off inside of a pool, especially during a timed exercise. So that was my first DQ. And I remember saying to myself after that, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to make it these next couple of weeks with only having 1 DQ left. I'm going to get DQ'd, and then I'm going to waste all this time, all of this, this effort that I'm putting in, and the grind. I mean, 12, 13-hour days of working out, screamed at, and I'm not going to do it. And my buddy Adam and I were staying in the same room, and it was a Wednesday, and he said, man, let's just go get a picture of Budweiser. I said, that's a good idea. And we got my first picture of Budweiser. And because the base bar on Wednesday would stay open until about 2 a.m. was hump day. And then Saturday night was also the base bar would stay open 2 a.m. I know it sounds like I'm an alcoholic, but so on Thursday morning, we woke up, and I said, Adam, man, you know what? I'm just going to make it to Saturday. And then when Monday came and I didn't want to do this week, I said, you know what? I'm not going to get a DQ until Wednesday. I'm going to make it to Wednesday night, and we're going to split a pitcher of beer. And I had a lot of guys, I have what you call like a resting smile face. Like when people scream at me, like I just kind of smirk, I just kind of smile. And man, so there's so many different instructors that wanted me to fail, and I knew it, but that's where they messed up, right? I knew that they knew. It's like the Friends episode. I knew that they knew that
That's their job, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
I
knew that they wanted me to fail. So I knew that they were going to come in and that they were going to fuck with me. So what that gave me was the ability to mentally prepare for them to fuck with me. Whereas anybody else inside of the class, they didn't know if it was their day or not. They didn't know whether or not they were going to be able to, to get through the day without getting their mask tossed in the water. I knew every single day that I was going to be a focus of somebody's attention. That gave me the mental aware or acuity to say, I need to prepare myself right from 6 a.m. all the way until they let me go. At any minute, I'm gonna be messed with. And I just kept making it to Saturday. And then I just kept making it to Wednesday. And I just kept making it back to Wednesday. And I watched all these people ring the bell and they get out there. And I graduated. And I always say, like, I didn't make it 6 weeks. I just made it to Wednesday and I made it to Saturday. So I just made it 3 days at a time. And that life lesson that I learned there saved my life.
Well, and the lesson, to be specific, was like to just break down large problems into small increments.
So here's the problem. So many people, and we hear it in law enforcement all the time, I've got 15 years, 3 months, and 14 days, and 10 hours left. If you say that, leave the job, right? Because if you're going to count down 15 hours, 14, and all that stuff, you're miserable. Mm-hmm. Stop being miserable. Life is too short. One of the things that you learn about being a cop is how short and how quick life can be. And so the lesson inside there is this. Stop looking at things so globally. If you're facing a problem, you're facing a situation, and you want to get through that problem, make it granular. And the one piece of advice that I can give anybody that's listening, I'll look right in the camera when I say this, is that in my hardest days, sometimes I had to count second by second by second. And when I sat in my Yukon, ready to end my life, it was second by second by second. And when you move things in, a lot of times it's hard to look at things.
You get overwhelmed.
It's overwhelming.
By the problem.
And
they say eat an elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And you can make it one more second. You can make it one more minute. And
Yeah.
you know what I would do is I could celebrate that second. I could celebrate that minute. Or I could look at my watch and say, well, damn, I just made it an entire hour when I thought I was going to end my life, or I thought I couldn't do it. And nobody can control that clock. And I love that piece to it, right? So like, there's two pieces of time that I love. Stop looking at things so globally, so huge, so milestone-ish. Just
Make it to lunch.
make it to lunch, make it to breakfast, make it to a cup of coffee, make it to a pitcher of Budweiser on a Wednesday night, right? And then the other aspect of that, no matter what happens inside of that time frame, you and they can't control the clock ticking. So in my head, no matter what was happening to me on that pool deck or outside in the ocean, no matter what he was saying to me, he can't stop me from having a pitcher of Budweiser tonight. He can't stop the clock. It's still ticking. So keep screaming. As the longer you scream, the more ticks that are going off the clock. And I love that aspect of it. And nobody can control time. So,
That's a good strategy,
Yeah.
Griff. Griff, I made the mistake of becoming a rescue diver many years ago.
yeah.
And people underestimate how it's a huge mental thing to
Yeah.
clear your mask underwater.
Yeah.
Because it's a involuntary reaction your body has
Right.
that you've got water in your face.
Right.
I can appreciate.
Yeah. And then
How
the breath
different-
work that it takes from calming yourself down. And so after I got that first DQ, right? And again, I look back now and I was lucky to get that DQ because that DQ taught me that I had to calm myself down. So when you're gassed, all you want to do is rip the mask out and go, but you can't do it. You have to pause. You have to consciously say, I'm fine. And you have to use everything you have to push all of that water out of your snorkel. And then you get the reward, which is the air. And a lot of us don't put those two aspects together, but like calming yourself down, using your breath work, pushing that, and then your reward is the oxygen that comes back. And I love that aspect of it.
You got to be squared away to be making mistakes down at the bottom of the water.
Right.
You can't panic.
Nope,
There's nowhere
you
to
can't.
go.
Yep.
You need to fix it yourself.
Yep. And people don't realize you have so much more than your body and your brain will tell you that you have. And that's one of the first lessons that you learn in rescue school and STAR school is when you think that you're done, whether it's a run, a swim, or whatever, you still got 30% left in the tank. Like you could be physically on the ground. I mean,
The body's amazing.
your body wants to tell you that you're done, but you still got 30, sometimes 50% more than what you've given out. And that's really what STAR school teaches you is how to break through that boundary and how to get through that, where you think the world's going to stop, break through.
So you leave the Navy and you decide to join the Virginia Police Department.
Yeah, Virginia Beach, yep.
Tell me about that.
So that was crazy because I really thought I was going to be a career Navy guy. I always say, like when I speak, life's not fair, and it's not. And anybody thinks that life is fair, it's just not. But you have to understand that. You have to make peace with that, and you have to realize that part of life not being fair is the lessons that life needs to teach you to move on. And I put in for this program called Seaman to Admiral,
I'm
and I
so
wanted,
happy that you said that.
yeah,
Life is teaching you the lessons you need to know.
yeah,
I always tell my kids that the universe will give you what you deserve
Yeah.
when you deserve it.
yeah. And I got a lot of faith in a lot of aspects of it. And when I wrote my book, I wrote it chapter by chapter by chapter. And when it was finally done, it went off to the editors, and I read it all the way through. It was just this eye-opening aspect. It was like, well, damn, if chapter 2 didn't happen, chapter 11 wouldn't have gone well. You know what I mean? And I never did chapter 2 suck? Absolutely. Did going to rehab my senior year, did that suck? Absolutely. But if that didn't happen there, I wouldn't have succeeded in getting through my suicide attempt on March 17, 2017. I wouldn't have. There's no chance, and I attribute a lot of different aspects, but there's a lot of things that went into me getting through March 17th. But if chapter 2 didn't happen at Morristown Beard, I wouldn't be here today. And
If Morristown Beard didn't happen, Griff, I don't think you'd go so hard pushing that pedal to the metal,
Yeah.
proving to those rich kids
Yeah.
to justify your existence to the universe.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
Because you went hard. You go to Virginia Beach Police,
Yep.
and I read you out of 5,000 cops, you're number one, of course.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I never put that together, right? So there was probably 5,000 people that showed up for 30 spots. And I was in this program to go to Seaman or Admiral, which basically means you're going from enlisted to an officer. And so I was up in Virginia Beach staying with my brother, and he said, well, what are you going to do if you don't get this officer program at the Navy? I said, man, that's a great question. I've never like not gotten something, you know, and I've never put my mind towards something and not gotten it. He said, well, have you thought about being a cop? That would be right up your alley. You're in good shape. You're not a desk person. And so I went down and I took the PT test for the police department. There was like 5,000 dudes. And so I remember calling my wife at the time, my boy's mother, and I said, I'm not getting this. There's a whole bunch of fools out here for this job. And I just kept making it to the next stage. And then on a Friday afternoon, I get a call. And they said, we're offering you a spot in the 36th Virginia Beach Police Academy. And I remember like how I felt, right? Like I made it. I got it. I got this offer. But then I was like, but I'm still waiting on the officer thing. I said, well, so I explained to him, I said, I'm still waiting to become an officer in the Navy. I got waitlisted on the Seaman Admiral thing. I said, how long can you give me? He's like, it's 4 p.m. He's like, I'll give you till 5. I was like, damn, like that's a lot of time. Thank you so much for that. And then so I took that and I decided to be a police officer. And I went through the academy, and I was the top shot. I was like second or third in grades on tests, and I was a top PT. Because again, I mean, I could run for days. I push-ups and sit-ups. I think my entrance into I got to give one of my buddies a shout out though. But I entered the academy at 1.5 miles at 8:58 mile and a half, and then I exited the academy at 8:32. I was the number 1 going in, but I was the number 2. My buddy Matt Muzzy beat me on the exit. He beat me by like 4 seconds. So but anyway, so all of those combined, I wound up being the honor recruit. So I was the number 1 recruit between all 3 of those. And I was teaching somewhere, and somebody said, man, out of 5,000 people, you finished as the number 1. And I remember how it hit me, because I never felt like I accomplished anything. And I just wanted to make it to the next day. I just wanted to graduate. And I just kept doing the best I could, no matter what the evolution was. And I remember how that sat. I was like, wow. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like out of all 5,000 of those people that showed up, I finished first in the academy. And that the level of pride I have from that, just that one thought in my head was really.
Griffin, I'm sitting here thinking life isn't fair because you're a big, strong guy.
Yeah.
Plus you got 1,500 plus on your SAT.
Yeah.
Super smart guy. And so you got an extra helping of everything when God made you. You know, you're just a big, strong athlete.
Except for chins. God took a break. That's why I covered up with beard, man. Yeah.
So Virginia Beach, 3rd precinct. What type of beat is that? What type of work is going on there?
So out of the academy, you got to choose your precinct based on how you finished in the academy. So I choose the 3rd precinct. 3rd precinct was they call them the 3rd herd. So we had a lot of Section 8 housing. We had a lot of crime. It was the highest crime in Virginia Beach, and that's where I wanted to go because I wanted to learn. I wanted to be thrust into the middle, and so I jumped right in and loved every minute of it. And so we had Lake Edwards, we had Campus East, we had. Some really bad. We had bad clubs. We had shootings all the time. We had just a lot of places where, there's just a lot of calamity.
Griff, in your book, one of your first calls is a suicide. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I went through FTO phase, and I remember the first day, like where you don't have somebody sitting next to you, and I was just like up on Shore Drive. I was just not making left turns without my blinker on, going to get coffee when I felt like it. Going to the bathroom when I wanted to. I didn't have to say, hey, can I stop and get a coffee? And I remember how great I felt. And about, I want to say like noon, 1 o'clock, I got the first call. And you got tones at this time. I don't know if they still do tones, but tones mean a code 2 call. So do that like alerts units that you have a hot call. And so again, I'm way out on Shore Drive. They put like their hot zones are 25, 325, 326. So they put like the rookies way out on the outside. So I heard the tones come out, and I'm listening to them, like 330 zone. I'm like, oh, shit, like that's me. So it was a 21-year-old, unconscious, not breathing, what you call a code gray, and flew there. I was pretty close to it, and it was a duplex. I go up into the room, and there was a 21-year-old Navy kid. And he stripped himself down naked, and he shot himself. And at this time in Virginia Beach history, you had to kind of move the body around to make sure there's nothing suspicious. So I put on my gloves and I'm moving the body around, and again, clear gunshot wound. And as I'm moving the body around, the coagulated blood, at the corner of the coagulated blood, and I can still see it to this day, there was a little yellow note. And I pulled it out, And I remember it said, I made out like a two who, like I would imagine like it was like an O and M, but I always saw was the 2 and the W and the H. Everything else was kind of washed away from the blood. The blood had just eaten all the ink on it. And I remember how that just bothered me. And I had all these questions. You know, kid was 21 years old. He's, you know, naked. He shot himself. What did he want to say to the world? So I had all these questions. I went home that night. I said to my wife at the time, I said, she goes, you know, how's your first day? I said, it was good. I said, I did have this one call. And this young man took his life, and just, to me, I just wanted to know what he wanted to say to the world. Why did he strip down naked? Why did he shoot himself? What did the note say? And so I didn't lose sleep, but I thought about it. And the next day I went into work, and I found one of the senior guys, and, you know, I pulled him aside. I said, hey, man, I said, I'm kind of struggling a little bit with yesterday's suicide call. He's like, man, what's up? I said, this young man took his own life. He stripped down naked. I just have all these questions that aren't answered. And I said, it just bothers me. And he said, and I'll never forget it, he said, Griff, if you're not strong enough to see it, then this isn't the job for you. And he got in his car and drove away. And I remember how that hit me. And I don't fault him by any stretch of the imagination. He was a great cop. That's the mentality that he took into the job. But I wanted to be like him. And I wanted to be like, you always kind of emulate certain people on the job, whatever job it is. You have somebody that you want to be like. And so you look how they do things. Even in sales now, like I look at guys that are successful. How do they do it? He was a guy that was successful. So how did he do it? And so, roger that, got it. And I took that mentality and I moved that forward. Anything that came to me that I didn't understand, that I wanted to talk about, that I wanted to kind of figure out, that didn't sit right, I just packaged it down. I just pushed it down and didn't talk about it, didn't think about it. The moment that call was over, I let it go as much as I possibly could. And all of those things just kept stacking up and stacking up. And
Do you think that's good advice?
no, it was the worst. That was the second worst thing that I've ever been told.
Pushing balloons down in the water.
Yep, they're going to come up. You know, and the problem is that they're going to come up when they want to come up. Mm-hmm. It's not like you're going to say, you know what, today's the day that I'm going to let a balloon up. It doesn't happen that way. It happens when those balloons are ready. Most of the time, they're going to resurface at the worst possible time. And I've seen balloons resurface and cause guys to have a 5-year bid in prison. Great guys that I would trust my children with. I've seen balloons resurface and a domestic assault in a career be lost. I've seen balloons resurface and a DUI fatality traffic accident. I've seen balloons resurface and child abuse. And, you know, that's the problem. And if you don't address those balloons, if you don't address them on your calendar, then they're gonna address themselves on their calendar. And, you know, you're playing Russian roulette with your life. And I tell everybody that, like, if you don't address the trauma, the average human being sees 3 to 5 critical incidents in a lifetime. From the time that you're 0 years old to the time that you die, you're going to see maybe 3 to 5. 3 to 5 dead bodies, 3 to 5 fatal car accidents, 3 to 5 shit that you don't ever want to see that you're always going to remember. The average cop in a 25-year career sees between 300 to 400. And every single one of those 300 to 400 is going to leave an impression on your brain. The way that you deal with those 300 to 400 is up to you.
Isn't it amazing that police accumulate all of this trauma and suicide's the leading cause of death, but the strategies behind coping with it, this guy's strategy was for you to be stronger.
Right.
And push it down.
Yeah. And that's the alpha male mindset, right? And but here's the thing that people don't realize is that we all came onto the job with a clean bill of health. We wouldn't be cops if we didn't have a clean bill of health, but yet the number one leading cause of death is suicide, and we're not putting these things together. Mm-hmm. So you're telling me that every single police officer, or the majority, let's say 99%, have a clean bill of health, both mentally and physically, and then inside of 20 to 25 years, the leading cause of death for those same people is a mental health.
It's a huge problem. You know, I was just thinking about also, even civilians who don't accumulate this much trauma, they're allowed to take benzos and Xanax and prescription drugs, and a police officer, they have no other coping mechanism, no other way to get sleep at night, but lay your head down and try your best.
They really don't have any coping mechanisms, right? Like you can't go to your friends and say, hey, I'm struggling with that, because they're going to tell you to suck it up. You can't go to your work because they're going to put you on light duty and take away the one thing that you need, which is your community and which is your job, right? Not you don't need the job from from a financial side, but you need that from a mental health perspective. You've got to be out on the road. You've got to be with your guys. You've got to be on shift. And they're going to take that away, take your gun away, put you on a desk, at least until you get a clean bill of health, and so that you can just get another clean bill of health. And to me, that was always so wrong. Just there was never any way to cope with it. There was no answer.
Griff, Christmas, rookie year,
Yeah.
you're driving through the 4th precinct where one of your friends lives, the Navy.
No, third.
3rd precinct.
Yep.
And you recognize your friend. And tell
Yeah,
us
so
about
I'm about 2 years into the job at this point, right? So I started Virginia Beach, 2002, 2003. This is going into 2005. Yeah, 2004 into 2005. And I'm driving on Hampshire Boulevard in Lake Edwards, and I'm going to a house. This is Christmas Eve, and at this time in Virginia Beach history, you could write down license plates for a house, and if they, the owner of that car had criminal histories with narcotics, you could apply for a search warrant. So that's what I was doing. I was on my way to that house, and I saw my buddy Ben, and he was on the front lawn. He was playing with his son. And I'm like, damn, I haven't seen him. So I pulled my car over, and I'm like, hey, man, what's going on, bro? He's like, you good? I said, yeah. I said, you're stationed in Norfolk now? He's like, yep. I said, you're a cop? I said, yep. He said, meet my son, Benny Jr. I said, nice to meet you, little man. And he said, come inside. I want you to meet Brittany. I want you to meet my other son. I got a 6-month-old. And so we started chopping it up. And he said, man, what are you doing for Christmas? I said, well, I'm a young badge. I got to work. I'm going to be, matter of fact, I'm going to be right around the corner writing down license plates. He said, well, I got all kinds of family coming over. Why don't you come get you a spread? I said, I'll do that, man. I'm actually going to be right here. Better than Wawa, So he's like, I want to introduce you to the family and to mom and dad and everybody else. And I said, cool. And so I came over and I got me a plate, and I met his whole family. And I remember Benny Jr. was inside of the, I always tell the story because it just was one of my favorite memories. But he was in this like galley kitchen. He was cutting up Christmas cookies, and he was on this little step stool. And when a child looks at like a police officer, all they do is like go right to the gun, right? It looks like a cannon. So like you could see him like kind of snuck up behind him. He turns, he's like, like huge gun, but it wasn't. It was tiny. And he's like, are you a police officer? I said, yes, sir. And he said, that is so cool. And yeah, it was a good Christmas. It was a really good Christmas. And I take that memory with me, and it's one of my favorite memories, little Benny Jr. But fast forward until New Year's Eve, so just about 5-6 days later, and I was at the same house writing down license plates, and a call came out. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Units 325, Units 326, responded 767 Hampshire Lane, 2.5-year-old code gray. It wasn't my call, like I was writing down these license plates, but I remember saying to myself, I'm like, man, that's a really shitty call for New Year's Eve, But there was something about it, like, that I kept thinking about, but 10 seconds that went by, and 20 seconds that went by, 30 seconds went by, and all of a sudden it just dawned on me. It's like, damn, 767 Hampshire Lane, 2.5-year-old, that's Benny Jr. So I dropped the car and drive, and when I tell you, like, I was still the first officer on the scene because I wasn't far away where I was writing down these license plates, and I go driving up on the front lawn, and I bailed out of my car, and I go running inside, and Brittany was screaming. She was pointing into the bedroom, and she had taken the 6-month-old, gone into the bathroom to take a shower, and she put on Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and I remember hitting the door open, and I saw Benny Jr. over here on the right-hand side, and he had jumped up onto the windowsill, and he wanted to swing from the windowsill onto the dresser. And he grabbed the blind cord, and this is 2004, 2005. So the blind cord was one of those circle blind cords, and it caught him around the neck. And I remember bringing him down, and I started doing CPR, and I grew up going to church every Sunday, and I grew up praying every night. Before I went to bed, my mom or dad would come and, tuck me in or whatever as a little boy, and they would always, make me say my prayers, and I mean, if I had a football game on a Sunday, I had to go to church before the football game. I had to bring my pads to church and change in the bathroom and go to the football game. And I remember doing CPR on this little boy. And I remember I never really asked for much. I never really prayed and asked for things especially for myself. And I remember this was the first time that as I was doing CPR, I said, God, don't do this. Please do not do this. I said, this little boy was just making Christmas cookies 5 days ago in the kitchen. I started just pumping away, just praying. And, all of a sudden I got this breath. And I remember saying, in my head, I said, thank you, Lord. I knew you were there. I knew you were going to answer this prayer. I knew you would not let this little boy die in my arms. And that was the last breath that Benny Jr. took, and he took it right in my mouth. And shortly after that, EMS came through, and they pushed me off, and I kind of rolled off, and they started CPR. And I looked up, and there were scratch marks on the wall of where little Benny Jr. was trying to get down. And it ate me alive, man. It ate me alive because, nobody should have to feel that way. And then Brittany was screaming, save my firecracker. She's screaming, save my firecracker, save my firecracker. Because Benny Jr. was born on the 4th of July. And then I ate that for a long time. And, a lot of people don't put 2 and 2 together, from the book and from, why I ate that for a long time. I felt like it was my fault. And again, there's nobody on this side of planet Earth that can tell me that if I didn't respond when a call came out that I wouldn't have saved Benny Jr.'s life. There's nobody that can tell me that. And how do I say that? How do I offload that on somebody? How do I tell, Benny's father, hey man, I could have saved your son's life? How do I tell Brittany, hey, if I wasn't such a piece of shit sitting in my car and not responding to your call, I probably could have saved your son's life and we wouldn't be here today. And so, they didn't have a lot of family in the area, and so they weighed on me pretty heavily. And so as a cop and the family friend, I was there with them. We put Benny into, we changed him for the wake, and they wanted me around all the time. And I think I just resembled strength to them. And so they weighed on me, and I didn't get a really, but all this entire time in the back of my head, I just kept saying, like, this is my fault. And I couldn't say anything. And, that's another thing that I didn't really tell anybody that for a long, long time. But I would wake up with nightmares. I wouldn't sleep, and I was irritable, and I started drinking too much, and I started making bad decisions in my life. I wasn't the same person. I wasn't working out anymore. I wasn't taking care of myself mentally, physically. I wasn't being a good father. And so I did what a lot of cops do. I didn't want to go by Hampshire anymore. I didn't want to work in the 3rd precinct, and so I said to my wife at the time, I said to Kendra, I said, let's look at moving. Let's look at getting a new start. Things were falling apart. We had one son. We had a second son on the way, and I said, let's get a fresh start. Things are falling apart. I'm falling apart. I need a clear. But the problem is, you can move, but
You take your shit with you.
all those balloons still come with you, right? You can't leave them in the house that you move out of. You can't leave those balloons in the agency. They all come right with you. And as much as we try, they're gonna come to the surface at some point. So you either deal with them now or you deal with them when they decide to. And so I moved up to Keene, New Hampshire, and I decided to be the SRO. Keene, New Hampshire is just like a sleepy, nice town. People like frolic and pick fly. It's just a nice town,
Hey, Griff, before we go to New Hampshire,
Yeah.
if there's any officer that's listening to this,
Yeah.
knowing what you know now,
Yeah.
how would you process Benny Jr. differently?
Man, you know what? Number one, I would have taken a break. I would have used the resources that were available to me. Hindsight's always 20/20. At that time in my life, I was a 24-year-old, 25-year-old, however old I was, but I thought that I was stronger than anything that could have ever happened to me. And what I realize now is that I'm not. And I would say to you as a younger cop or as an older badge, to deal with it now. Take the time that you need. Trauma doesn't discriminate whether you got 1 year on the job, whether you got 15 years in a job, whether you got 40 years in a job. And everybody's going to go through trauma in a different way. But that trauma can also be a benefit. And here's what I would say to my younger badges that are listening to this podcast. Everybody looks at having this trauma and getting help as this bad thing. Like they don't need that, but maybe it'll help, maybe it won't. I'm here to tell you, there's so much wisdom that you can garner from that traumatic incident. Does the traumatic incident suck? It does, absolutely. But from Benny Jr., I learned the value of life. I learned the value of my faith. I learned the relationships. I learned, from a relationship standpoint, like how I was going to treat my sons and how I wanted to live my life. And I would say to those younger officers, if you don't process it now, you're doing yourself and your community a disservice because you're not going to be the best version of yourself moving forward from it. The more you put it down, the less you're taken away from being the best version of who you can possibly be. So, and again, it's just like, it's the old adage, right? Like if you get into a fight or if you get in a foot pursuit and you learn something from that, you're not going to do it the next time. So why would you not do it the same way, right? The number one weapon that we have is the 8 inches between our ears. Why would you not calibrate that, right? Why are we so forced on recalibrating our weapons, our mocks, the way we handle ourselves physically, but the number one weapon we have, we don't want to recalibrate. And those critical incidents that you go through are going to be the most impactful ability for you to look inside yourself and say, how can I do it better? How can I learn from that critical incident? And what did my brain do? Did I slow down? Did I speed up? Did I make a left when I should have made a right? And if you can garner the wisdom from that, I promise you, it will pay you all the dividends in life.
Isn't it interesting how our adversity is our gifts?
Yeah.
My trauma growing up and throughout life is like a furnace that forges these learning lessons. They're like diamonds that you can use for the rest of your life. I tell my kids all the time, I wish that they could experience trauma, because I know if you come out the other side, you're so much stronger and so much better. It's treasure.
Yeah.
Griff, I was thinking also when you were talking about making recommendations. Well, Chief Dean Esserman, I don't know if you know him from Providence. He talks funny like you.
Yeah.
Dean one time recommended a book to me. I think it's called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah, sure. Yep. It's right on my phone. Yep.
Yeah, there's some techniques. I remember one of them is like this rapid eye movement thing. I've never done that. But one recommendation is to be creative, to have this creative outlet, whether it's painting or something, because trauma can physically change you.
Yeah.
Physically, your memory gets worse. It physically rewires your brain and your personality. And through creative work, you can express yourself and get back to who you are, get back to your narrative. And so anyway, I would recommend that book. It's been years since I read it, but...
Yeah, it's called The Body Keeps the Score. Great, phenomenal book. And one of the other things that I recommend, there's 2 types of therapies that have worked, really well for me. EMDR was the first one. So after Benny's passing away.
Is that the eye movement thing?
Mm-hmm. Yep, eye movement, desensitization, reprogramming. I think that's it. I always get like the D and the R wrong. But what it does is what it did for me was I didn't sleep. And I would wake up with nightmares, and so again, like not sleeping was a big problem in my life, because I was redoing and replaying it every night. So what it does is it reprograms your brain to when your brain goes to that shitty place, it automatically takes you to your happy place through like horizontal gaze nystagmus is what it like feels like, or you can do it through vibration. What it does is it triggers your brain, you deep dive into your critical incident, and then you switch gears and you reprogram your brain. When your brain starts to when my brain would go to responding to Benny, it would automatically go to the beach. And so North Carolina, the Outer Banks was kind of my happy place, the smell of the salt water, the sand. And so your brain reprograms itself. So, and again, my counselor at the time up in New Hampshire was like, we're going to try something. I'm like, cool, let's try it. And I'm, again, doing all this different like stuff. And I'm like, man, this is some witchcraft. I don't know what you're doing. But that night, I shit you not, was the first 8 hours that I had slept. And I called her and I said, I don't know what witchcraft you did. Now, this is way before anybody knew what EMDR was. I had never heard the term. Now it's somewhat of a common term. And it's phenomenal. And still now it's not used as much as it should. So, and the other one is called ART. And I'm struggling on what ART stands for, but it's ART therapy. It's basically like advanced recalibration therapy. And so what it does, your brain doesn't differentiate between real memories and fake memories. And so just prior to here, we were talking about a memory that I had at a former employment, and it really hurt me. And it made me feel it in a certain way. And so I went through ART therapy with a counselor, and it was phenomenal. So I was able to essentially create a director's cut of that memory and let go of a lot of the trauma that came along with that. Like, when I say trauma, like, it just made me nervous when I would see signs of that same type of situation, to the point where, like, I would push back and not be the person that I was inside of how I could be that. And so ART was phenomenal for me because I created a brand new memory from a situation that, so again, you're not changing things, you're changing the outcome from it, and you're looking back at it as a positive instead of a negative, and it's phenomenal. So those are the two things that I would recommend.
Yeah, I'm trying to be really conscious of just offering some strategies to officers, because I feel like in policing it's a lot, like I started the podcast with, a lot of people talk a big game, but when you really go down and ask people, what are you doing for your people?
They box check. They box check, 100% box check, and that's a shame. I always say you have to be able to integrate what you're doing to help police officers with police officers, right? The problem here, and there's a book out of Dallas PD called Checkpoints by Ruben Ramirez. Great dude. I've known him for a long time. And he hit the nail on the head. He said, we have all the therapies out there. We have EMDR, we have ART, we have equine therapy. We have the ability to do X, Y, and Z. We have police officers that are struggling. The problem is that we don't integrate them. And we don't allow those officers to use that service or make it beneficial for them to use that. And so he created a program called Checkpoints, where you have influential police officers at your agency that are status checking their police officers, letting them know that they've paved the way. Because again, if you don't know how to get someplace, you're probably not going to go, right? And so those checkpoint officers would see a critical call that come out, a loss of life call, and they would call and say, hey, AT, I just want to check in with you. I know that you went to a fatal car accident 2 nights ago. Just want to see how you're doing. Just want to let you know that there's resources available to you. Here's how you go about doing it. This is what, this is everything that you need to know about it. Is that something that you might be interested in? And from that, you've got an influential police officer talking to another police officer, and 3 things going to happen. They're going to say, no, I'm all set. Okay, cool. Well, let me know if you need it. Yes, I would love to get that help. Perfect. Or, nah, this doesn't apply to me, right? And you're bridging the gap between service. I mean, let's be real for a second. Counseling's a $1 billion industry for a reason. It works. Anybody that says that counseling doesn't work, they're out of their minds. Counseling's been around forever. So why are police officers not using it?
Because of the culture and the stigma. That's why. Because if you raise your hand,
and you just hit the nail on the head.
Everything.
So that's why you have the most influential people at your police, not chiefs, not deputy chiefs, the most influential senior members, and every agency has them.
We're going to get back into, if Anthony could wave magic wands, how would we fix these problems? But you said the words, you ran away.
Yeah.
You left for Virginia Beach, go up to New Hampshire.
Yep.
And tell me about how the undercover work begins up there.
Yeah. And so when I got up to Virginia Beach, I just kind of ride off in the sunset. Nice, sleepy New England town. I mean, church steeple at the end of the downtown, just a beautiful downtown area. And I became the SRO. I started coaching lacrosse, and I really enjoyed what I was doing. And then the opioid epidemic hit. And like we were talking on the phone, I remember one of the guys fast forward now, but the opioid epidemic hit, and I started seeing all these kids, farm parties were a big deal. Like, all these high school kids were going out, and, like, they call them farm parties. They're taking pills all the time. They're not smoking green weed anymore. They're not drinking. It's like is glow sticks and vapor rub and pills and everything else, and people are overdosing.
This is 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So fentanyl is getting big out there, but nobody knows what this is at
Right.
that point.
And so, these kids are bumping a line of what they thought was heroin or cocaine, and next thing you know, they're dead. And we call it a hot batch. And so a hot batch would come out of Springfield or Holyoke or Lawrence or Lowell, and somebody would die, or multiple people would die, or we'd have to get Narcan. And I just remember, and right around like 2014 is when they asked me if I would go back undercover. And I remember talking with my wife at the time, and hindsight's 2020. I look back and I'll be honest with you, I don't know that I would go. If you said, would you go back undercover? If you could rewind the clock to 2014, would you say yes? And I honestly, if I'm gonna be
real talk.
Yeah, real talk. If I'm gonna look deep inside my soul, I'm gonna tell you no, I wouldn't.
It cost you a lot.
It cost me a lot. It cost me my marriage. It cost me a relationship with my children. It cost me a lot. And I've got a great relationship now with my boy's mother, with my ex-wife. But
what was at that decision? Were you chasing? Was it adrenaline?
See, I love the undercover world. So, I always knew that I had a certain ability when it came to that. I mean, just from the way I grew up, from from the high school that I went to, from the Navy. I mean, the Navy is a conglomerate of multiple different cultures inside of one ship for 6 months, right? You learn so much. You learn the difference in Hispanic cultures. You learn the difference in African American culture. You learn the difference between, Portuguese to Puerto Rican. Like, and you understand this. You understand what's important to each of these cultures. And I thought that was such a big piece of the puzzle from how I grew up, and then having have Morristown beer to the Navy. I just felt like I was really good at it. And when when I get the call, it was I just felt like I could do something special. And I knew that there wasn't anybody else at my agency that could do what I did. And that's exactly what I did. I went full tilt. I mean, it was full
so you
send.
want to make a big impact.
Yeah, it was full send.
SRO and full send undercover work.
Yep.
So Griff, you go undercover. I believe you were like an associate of Hell's Angels, your biker gang.
Yep.
And were you a plug for the cartel?
Yep, for Sinaloa. Yep.
Tell us about that world, 2014, 15. What's work like for you?
Yeah.
What's happening?
And the only way I can describe it was just chaos. Every day was sheer chaos, sheer. Everybody had confidential informants. You're flipping confidential informants. You're trying to get them to intro you into somebody else. You're trying to work up the chain. But, tradecraft wise, you're always trying to figure out what the next thing is, what the next packaging method is, how they're going to call, whether it's fingers, whether it's points, whether it's bundles, whether it's, at this time they had they call them waxies. And so they're putting like the hot fentanyl inside of like wax bags. And then they called them a bundle. So there was 10 bags inside of a bundle, and those bundles would have like little wax bags. And they would, and they'd rip them off, and then they would cook them up. And so you're always trying to find the next hot batch who was going to bring that out. But it was chaotic. It was, and here's the thing about undercover work: some cops just can't do it, and you have to. I came from so many different places in my life, whether it was rehabilitation, whether it was Morristown Beard, whether it was, Morristown, as a whole. I was able to, we talk about humiliation and shame. That's the mindset that you bring in if you're going to buy dope. You're not proud. You're not standing up straight. Your shoulders aren't back. You're not walking into someone like, hey, man, serve me up. Because you walk in like that, they're like, get the fuck out of here, man. You're a cop. You don't want to be here. You're not trying to give away your money. You're not wearing a nice watch. You're not wearing, I tell in the undercover survival class, like, I remember like I had a new guy come up and he's like, man, I'm ready to do some UFC work. I said, okay. I said, well, the first thing is you need to go home and get changed. He's like, why? I said, you got on a $120 pair of running sneakers. You think any addict has $120 running sneakers? Yeah. I said, now look at your wrists. What about it? You got a $50 Casio G-Shock. You think any addict has a Casio G-Shock? But every single cop does. Why? Because they look cool and they break every 6 months. We go to Walmart and we buy a new one. And then I said, the last thing I need you to go change is that little chain. because on the end of that chain is your badge. And so, and people don't realize that, and then you can't be the same person. But yeah, it was just chaos. And I remember we flipped a girl, and she brought me down, and they were running dope. The Sinaloa was running dope through taxi cabs. We didn't have Uber at this time. I know, like, I'm bringing back a lot of memories, but like, so what you would do is you would call on your way down, and there was all these different codes, which is crazy from like a technology standpoint. And I'm gonna do the best I can to remember what the codes were. But we would say, hey, we're on our way, and the person would text back like a string of numbers. And that was the number, that was like a block number, right? Like it was like, I don't know if it was like, 70th and the corner of like 70th and Independence or whatever that was. And then we would send back a number of how many bags we wanted. Wow. And so you would get down there, they would come around to the side of the car, they'd either drop it in, or you would have to park your car, get out of your car, and then a taxi cab would come pick you up. And then a taxi cab would drive you around, which again, think about this from an undercover standpoint, right? You don't know whether or not you're gonna get into a cab and go for a trip, or they're just gonna drop it in the car. And so it was just a nightmare to try and investigate, because you can never understand from a safety standpoint what you were doing. Plus, you're tripping between states. You're going from New Hampshire to Massachusetts, which is a nightmare in and of itself, between jurisdictional stuff, and that's where the Haida group comes in.
So Griff, you become CJ Davis at this point.
CJ Davis, yeah.
Yeah, and tell us like what CJ stands for.
So it's a funny story, but so when I was in undercover school, they always said you want to have like initials, right? Because people can search you. This is now technology is starting to evolve, and if you have a name, one of the websites was like howmanyofyou.com. And so if you look up howmanyofyou.com, you're going to see that there's like 17 Matthew Griffins in the USA. And so you didn't want to choose a very, a name that was unique, because people would research that. Like if you say, hey, like whatever the name is, they're going to look it up and figure out who you are. And if it doesn't jive, they're not going to serve you up. So, but you also had to get your social security number on point, because the first 3 letter numbers of your social security number designate what part of the world or the country that you've been born in. So there's all these little different things that that you have to kind of realize when you backstop yourself. So I decided CJ was going to be my name. And so I'm buying a funny story behind that. So it's like broad daylight. I'm buying like a 10-pack, 5-pack or 10-pack of weed, and all these just patchwork, hippies. It wasn't, I'm wired up. And so I go in there with like 30 grand, and so they're all sitting around just taking bong hits, and we're looking at the the weed, like no seeds, no stems, like it's just beautiful. It's got like crystallized buds in it and everything else. And again, from a money standpoint, marijuana was where it was at, right? Because again, a pound of weed, a good pound of weed was running like anywhere between $2,500 to like $3 grand, $3,500, and so anyway, so we're negotiating this whole thing. The dude takes a bong hit, and he looks at me. He's like, "Yo, man." He's like, "Bro, what does the C stand for, man? Like, what's your name? Like, what's CJ?" And to this day, I don't know why I didn't say Chris, Craig, any normal ass name in the entire world, but like a dumbass, what do I say? I said, "Man, it stands for chill." And so,
that's great.
And so he's like, and then as I said it, as it was coming out of my mouth, like the time you're like, "Why the fuck are you saying this?" I'm like, it actually stands for chill, bro. But like, my full name is Chili. And I'm like, what am I doing? So this dude looks at me, and he's like, and he erupts laughing. He's like, "Bro, chill is fucking chill." And so they just laughed at that, because I was a chill dude. I was just very relaxed and easy going about it. And so they're like, "Chill is," and I could hear the people in the van laughing. And
so you're known for chill.
Yeah,
you're known as Chill for
so I was Chill Davis from there on out, internally and externally, everything. So my license plate on my car is Chill 1, and I had my son had like Chill 3 for a little bit. So Chill's been a big part of our life ever since that one.
Running CIs. Tell us about that process.
So CIs are difficult, because it's a hustle all the time. They have an angle and you have an angle, right? So like Whereas in law enforcement, there's not a lot of gray areas, black or white. I make a traffic stop, you're going to get a warning or a ticket. But in drug work, you're operating in the gray. I can't count the number of times that I'd have a CI, I'd go through, to sign them up. And I would say to them, and any drug cop that's listening to this that says they didn't do this, you're out of your mind. You're lying to yourself. We would go through this, and I'd sign you up as a confidential informant, knowing full well that you're a full-blown addict. And I would say to you, while under the control of the New Hampshire Attorney General's Drug Task Force, you will not use any controlled substances with my knowledge. Is that correct? And you would say yes, right? But I knew full well that you were going to go out and that you're going to keep, if you didn't, you're not going to be a CI for me. You're a full-blown heroin addict. So how are you going to go through withdrawals and still get served up and introduce me to somebody? It's not going to work. And so it was just but you have to understand that they have a hustle too. And so one of the things that I was big on early on in my undercover life was using technology, understanding. And again, I think this comes back from the way I grew up, but I knew that if that's the case, like real talk, let's think about it for a second, right? If your whole goal in life is to not withdraw, because again, thing about opioids is it's like two
They don't want to
factors.
feel sick.
No, I mean, like anybody that's gone through an opioid withdrawal will tell you that it's the worth withdrawal. Number one, what do opioids do? They block your pain. So if you've been an opioid addict for the better part of like 3, 4, 5, 6 years, what have you done for the better part of 6 years? You block pain. You haven't felt bumps, bruises. You haven't felt any type of like, I feel pain every day. I got out of bed this morning, my knee hurt, my back hurt. You don't feel that as an opioid addict. So when you go through withdrawals, it's two-factored. Number one, your body's going to crave the narcotic, going to crave the opioid. So you're going to go through the withdrawals. Your temperature's going to raise. You're going to want to vomit. You're going to want to feel cold. You're going to want to feel hot, right? So your body's rejecting that you don't have this chemical substance on board. But the second thing that it's going to do, and any opioid addict will tell you this, is that it's going to be excruciatingly painful. Because for the first time, you're going to start to feel those bumps and those bruises. So, from a pain scale perspective, pain tolerance wise, you've been zeroed out. You haven't felt pain in a long time, but now all of a sudden you're locked up and you're going through withdrawals or whatever the case have you. Everything hurts. It's painful. And you'll hear every addict say that. Like, it's just, everything hurts because you're feeling pain again for the first time. And so again, back to the story, they don't want to withdraw. That's their main hustle is, if I go to jail, I'm going to have to withdraw. They don't care about the jail time, anything else. They just don't want to withdraw. So let me ask you a question, AT. If you don't want to withdraw and I'm signing you up as a confidential informant, what's the number one thing that you're not going to give me?
My supplier.
100%. And what's the number one thing that I want?
My supplier.
So how do we get through that? Right? So how do we bridge this gap? And again, a lot of cops are like, oh, cool, you're going to give me, you got 5 people for me. But guess what those 5 people are? Those are little corner boys that we don't give a shit about. We want Mr. Big. And so, the number one way, and I always question my younger cops, like, all right, talk to me. Like, how are you going to get that plug? And, they're like, oh, well, I'm going to follow them to their plug. Okay, cool. So now you sign them up. You raise your right hand, sign them up as confidential informant 001, and now you're following them to violate the contract that you just said, and now you're going to work them on that contract. Good luck with that in court. That should work out really well for you. There's no moral implications there. Another one is like, I'm just going to keep pressing them. Okay, you could waterboard them, and they're not giving you their top plug. They're not. And then all of a sudden, like, the light switch goes on. Technology. So before we sat down, you're probably under arrest because I hit you, I put you on some type of a bid. I've got your phone. So before we sit down, I'm going to hold up your phone and I'm going to say, I'm going to take your first 5, right? Because I know that they're bullshit. So I'm going to talk to you like, all right, so tell me who you can do. This is what you're looking at from a charges standpoint, blah, blah, blah. I can do him, and him, right? And I know that there's nobody else that you can do. I'm not going to find anybody else in your phone or anything else. Like, that's your 5. Yep. Cool, you sure? Yep. All right, cool. Give me the password to your phone. No. Okay, then go to jail. Go to jail because we got to build a level of trust. We got to build a level of confidentiality between the two of us. And if I don't trust you, then you can go off to jail and you can go do your bid. It doesn't bother me. And if they do, guess what? I got 5 free people to go investigate. But once they do unlock the phone, I know that Mr. Big is right inside there. And if you remember back in the cell phone days, we could do like significant contact or significant locations. Remember that? Like that was the best, man. We had significant locations in a cell phone. It would tell you exactly where a person had went, and nobody ever knew that it was in their phones. Like it was great. They turned it off now, but it would show me, because again, think about it. If you're going to use 3-4 times a day, you're going to be at that location 3-4 times a day. And if that doesn't jive with the 5 people that you gave me, now you just found Mr. Big. And if Mr. Big from that location, when they texted, hey, I'm on my way, that's Mr. Big's phone number. Yeah. So I can come back to the table and be like, all right, look, like I just unlocked your phone. Who's this number right here? That's nobody. Look, man, I'm not playing. This is like, I'm gonna give you one more shot. If we don't talk about this person right here, you're going off to jail. It's the only shot that you have right here. And a lot of times that was it. I made them go to the corner boys, but they gave me Mr. Big, and that's the philosophy that you have to do from a drug cop. They're trying to give you the corner boys, give them the corner boys, you take Mr. Big.
Griff, I'm imagining you with like 4 or 5 phones. 3 or 4 of them are probably prostitutes and corner boys and other users. And I want to get into like how that impacted your family. You know, in just a moment. Who is Mr. Big? I'm going to make an assumption here that marijuana gets legalized. You were talking about how profitable it is.
Yeah.
But it gets legalized around this time, and suddenly the cartel loses money.
Yeah, and like this is what's so crazy. And again, this is Matt Griffin's theory. It's not, but this is what I truly believe. And I wound up doing a lot of training around fentanyl, and I had a class that I created called Fighting Fentanyl, and I started really looking at it. And the cartel lost about 40% of its business when marijuana became legal. They just stopped really kind of importing it as much. We had all these grows going on, and think about it, like if you have a business and you lose 40% of your business, what are you going to do? You have to try to find another way for it to be offset. And so, we have all this cheap heroin coming into the U.S., but we don't have as many heroin addicts. And so, how do we get more heroin? If I'm the cartel, how do we get more heroin addicts so that I can recoup the 40% that I lost on marijuana? And the answer is through the opioid epidemic. Think about it, right? And so, like it's a recipe for disaster. You have the cartel really wanting to make up the difference. You have pharmaceutical companies trying to make as much money as possible with very, very deep pockets and the ability to control legislation and things like that. And you have an American public who is in this kind of pain rejuvenation. And so, I question a lot of people. I always say, like, a lot of times we don't think in America. We just allow things to happen to us. And we're, think about the 1 through 10 pain scale. Where did that come from? Nobody asked that question. We didn't have that, in the early 80s and the 70s and even in the 90s, really. Like, where did that pain scale come from? And why do we need this pain scale? Like, why do I need to tell a doctor I'm a 7 on the 10? Like, who gives a shit? My number is different from your number. We could have the exact same knee injury. I could be a 10 and you could be a 1. So why does the doctor need that information? And the answer is because doctors needed a subjective amount of information, a subjective number to prescribe opioids. Walk that back as far as you want. We don't have enough time on this podcast to go through why that happened. But up until that point, you only had subjective nature. You had temperature, you had heart rate, blood pressure. You had things that could not be subjected or could not be subjective. The doctors needed the ability. And you had doctors that were being fined if they weren't prescribing hardcore opioids to people that came in there. And so, America and Canada together make up about 90% of the world's opioid prescriptions. And it's eye-opening to see things like that. And we, as the American people, need to do a better job of, like, just asking questions. Like, so why? Why do I need this pain scale?
Yeah, Griff, I mean, you were like at ground zero of the fentanyl explosion in the Northeast.
Yeah, and New Hampshire and Ohio were like the 2 leading states for it. Like, we saw a 1,600% increase in fentanyl overdose, in like 6 months.
A lot of people don't realize, how much more profitable fentanyl is than heroin, for example.
Yeah.
You have to grow things. And,
I mean, think about this, right? So, like, you put a poppy. So let's chop that up for a second. So from a, say you're a cartel, let's strictly business and money. So you're going to say like in Afghanistan, right? You're going to plant a poppy seed. It's going to take you an average of 3 months for that poppy seed to grow, and it's going to look like this. And then you're going to scratch the outside of that poppy plant, and that's going to release like a tar type of like morphine. You got to take that morphine, you got to bring it back, combine it with like a bunch of different chemicals, and that's going to produce the clay-like heroin that we know today. So you're probably at 4 months from the time you plant a seed till you get the clay-like heroin. Now you still need to smuggle it usually into South America or into Mexico, and then it's got to go out to their source cities. Depending on the cartel, like Chicago is Sinaloa, Boston is Sinaloa, they're going to get it out to their source cities probably through truck drivers. So you probably got about 4.5 months. And now so that's one side of it, right? Now you got fentanyl. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. It's stronger than your heroin, which means that it's more potent. It's like let's take the beer example, right? This is Natty Light, and this is a heady topper. This is a double IPA, triple IPA. So I can make this in 8 hours in a lab and be ready to go. It's a triple IPA, or I can make Natty Light and wait 4 months. So from a business perspective, if I take a full pure kilo of heroin, I can step on that like the average like 8 times. So a kilo of heroin, let's just use like my prices from back in the day. I have no idea what prices are today, but kilo of heroin, let's say it's 30 grand. Pure, you can step on that 8 times. You're gonna make 240,000 on a kilo. So when I say step on it, for anybody that doesn't know, that's just I'm gonna take 1 kilo, I'm gonna chop it up in half, use baking soda, creatine, whatever kind of combination. I'm gonna take 1 kilo and make it 2. I'm gonna take 2 kilos and I'm gonna make them 4. That's called stepping on your product. So you can step on it about 8 times and still have a certain amount of effect for the end user before it becomes too saturated and it's just garbage. Fentanyl, you can step on an average of 30 times. So pure numbers, I can wait 4.5 months for that poppy seed to be planted and I can make a maximum of $240,000. Or in 8 hours, I can make fentanyl and I can take that $30,000 kilo, I can step on it 30 times and I can make just shy of $1 million. You tell me which one you want to do. And that's the problem when we talk about fentanyl. And so that's why the cartels are completely on board with this opioid epidemic and starting to push a lot of this fentanyl-laced products in, because the pharmaceutical industry is pushing opioids. Now the cartel is pushing opioids as well. So we're working hand in hand.
Yeah, the only place inflation hasn't impacted is drug prices, because
Right.
a lot of those prices have declined. Yeah, even the price of fentanyl is just declining almost every year.
Yeah, crazy.
Griff, the precursors, they go to Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Sinaloa runs their labs there.
Yep.
They don't put labs here in the States. Why not?
Because think about all of the different chemicals that you need to come in. Like, DEA does a pretty good job of controlling any of those class chemicals that come in. So, there's multiple different precursors that are going to need. So you have gallon drums coming in from China. They're going to get flagged. They're not going to get flagged going into Mexico. And so it's a lot easier for the cartel to bring all of those precursors needed in order to set up that lab in essentially a controlled environment like Mexico, where there's a lot less scrutiny. Those are billion-dollar labs that they're creating. If we shake down a lab in America, they're losing, however many millions or billions of dollars that they created that lab with.
So labs are still down in Mexico.
Yep.
But as you call him, Mr. Big. Mr. Big is lieutenant or capo that leaves the Sinaloa cartel, comes to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
What's Mr. Big doing there?
So he's running his whole set. So he's been assigned by the cartel to come into a certain area, Eastern Mass, Western Mass, New Hampshire, Southern, whatever the case is, and he's going to control. He'll be about 2 to 3 stages removed from the corner boys. So you got corner boys that are up and coming. They're either from the cartel or they're from the area. A lot of times they're like, they're family members, their kids, their nephews, their cousins, whatever. And then the step above them is going to be just kind of like who's going to control them. And then your capos are going to be your leading lieutenants. That's who's going to come from the cartel. And so that's kind of like the hierarchy when it comes to Sinaloa. But those capos, that's where we came in, because those capos only have like a shelf life of so long, because everybody's trying to come up. You got DEA, HIDTA groups, you got drug task force, all trying to get to that capo, and again, they usually, I think the numbers on it were like 18 months to 2 years before you're either dead, charged, which is the best case scenario because you go off to prison, get 3 hots in a cot, or you get sent back to Mexico, where pretty much you're probably going to be dead anyway because the cartel. So, yeah.
Griff, you know, I grew up in Southside Chicago, and,
Yeah.
and just like a big generalization
Yeah.
that I notice, and listening to like jail calls and other calls, and just structuring this data, the you know, like if you, let's say somebody from the Bloods or the Crips, somebody shot and killed, like that's somebody's son.
Yeah.
Mom and dad are upset, grandma and grandpa are upset. The difference between MS-13 or cartel factions
Yeah.
is that you've got illegals. People
Yes.
don't know who these people are.
Yes.
And number two, I would say another big difference, again, a generalization, is they're super squared away. Super squared away. Like they will run, you got somebody in product, somebody in marketing, somebody in security or enforcement. It's like a Fortune 500 company
Without a doubt.
being run.
Completely organized,
Yeah.
completely structured, and they don't flaunt anything. They're not here to show everybody else in their community how much money they have. Their whole goal in life is to take that money and get it back to Mexico to support their families. That's it. Think about the difference between, and you keep developing a name for yourself, making sure your money is always right. They can count on you to come back. They're not trying to find you, and they're not texting you all the time saying, hey man, you owe me such and such. Once you get through that, then it's just a money-making aspect. So you get through those initial corner boys, and then you can move up. You're not going to buy anything more than like street-level quantities from those corner boys. Once your money has been right for so long, you're asking about, hey, I want to stop buying 5 fingers. I want to start buying a zip, half zip, whatever. And that's when you're going to get past those guys. And once you get past those guys, make your money right again, and then just keep kind of working your way up. What we realize is that you can't spend any more than about $10,000. And that was one of the key obstacles for capos and for a lot of, whether it's the Hells Angels, whether it's any of the biker groups.
Because of an IRS.
Because the IRS. And so you spend $900 or $9,999, it doesn't flag anything. But the moment that you touch $10,000, it's going to send a flag to the IRS. The IRS is going to send it to an IRS investigator. The IRS investigator is going to send it to the Hyder Group, the Drug Task Force, to whoever. Say, hey, this dude just went into this dealership to purchase this car, this whatever. Here's a picture of him. See what you can do, right? The moment that happens, don't think for a second that the cartel doesn't have a bug there too. They get wind of that, and now they either kill him, take him off, move him out, and somebody else comes up. So the niche that you can fit, and that I was able to fit inside there, was, we understand that you have a problem. I have a solution for you. And so we will take your money and we will give you wash money in an account that you can use that's not going to come back to your cartel or to you. And that's worth its weight in gold, right? And I know this sounds crazy to say, but you can only spend $9,999 so many different ways. You have access to, imagine this, you have access to any amount of money that you want, but you can only spend $9,999. You can never buy anything more than that. What do? It gets old, right? You can go out to eat, you can go buy clothes, but you can't buy a house. You can't buy a fancy car. You can't go put your name down on a mortgage. You can't go buy a business. You can't make yourself legit. Like, it's just,
So
there's
you
nothing
became the
that you can
solution
do.
to
It's
that problem.
frustrating, And it's funny because I was frustrated on the other side of it, right? Like, as a drug cop, I would come home, and a lot of people don't realize when I left to go undercover, I lost about 30% of my income. My wife and I had 4 boys, and we had one income. We made a decision early on in our life that I wanted my wife to raise my children, and not.
Is that because no more overtime?
No more overtime. Yeah. Yep. And so I was catching detail work all the time. But you can't do that now. And so, you got bills based on, people say don't base your bills on overtime, but good luck. Find me a cop that didn't base your bills on overtime, because especially if you're consistently getting ordered in, you got court, you've got, whatever it is, you're always getting 5 to 10 hours a week. So you base your bills on that. So you got car payments that are due, you got mortgage payments due, you got food that's not going on the table. And you're putting a strain on your family to make shit happen.
The disease in this country, and we're just not alert. No,
and it's not going anywhere.
No, we're not alert.
Yeah.
We're not sober to how big of a deal this is. So thanks for spending some time talking about that.
Yeah.
Griff, will you walk us through sort of the impact on your family that the undercover work took at that point?
Yeah, I always, and I try to be very respectful to my ex-wife. And the only thing I can say is that I take full responsibility for my divorce. I forgot how to be a husband and a father. I really thought C.J. Davis was cooler, was better, was more fun than Matt Griffin was. And at one point, my wife had said, I came home with like a black eye one night, and I got into we chased somebody down, we chased down a corner boy, and got into a couple of licks or whatever. And I remember she had said to me, she's like, I don't want to know, just go and get you a cold one, dinner's ready. I don't want to know. And I remember like, but I want to tell you. In my head, I was like, I want to tell you. It was fun. It was awesome. It was this, that, and that. But moving forward, I'm like, maybe she doesn't want to know. So maybe it bothers her if And so I stopped telling her about the things that we were doing, and we started to move forward. And when I couldn't take my kids to Longhorn, when I couldn't be, the father that I wanted to be, both financially and both in person. I let a lot of things slip in my life, and I thought that C.J. Davis was who I wanted to be. And C.J. Davis was a lot more fun. Let's be real. And I really forgot how to be Matt Griffin. And there's multiple times that I had date night set up with with Kendra, and I would be halfway home, and somebody called me and said I need you for this, I need you for that, and I would call her and say, hey, send the babysitter home. I got to go to work. Or I get to date night, and this is what we were talking about before. I get to date night. And I lay out all 4 of my phones. We're having a conversation. The phone rings. Like, hold on, honey, I got to take this. Let me walk outside. And we had words. Like if I said the word aardvark around my children, they know to scatter because a drug dealer had saw me, and I didn't want them to put 2 and 2 together in my kids. And you live on that kind of, the summer of 2016, we separated. And and I remember like being mad at her, like really, like this isn't working. Like I'm doing this great thing for our community and everything else, but really that was a lie. That was a lie that I was telling myself. I failed her as a husband. I failed my children, and I'm not scared to say that today. I'm not scared to say that I made the job more important than my family. And if you listen to this today, and if you have the chance, if you've gotten to this far inside of this podcast, don't do that. There is nothing more important than your family. There's nothing more important than your wife, than your children. Make them a priority in your life. I know it's easy to say, go to work, make more money, do the cool things. But if I had to rewind, I wouldn't have gone undercover, and I would have saved my marriage. And that's a tough thing to say, especially because it's, everybody makes choices. But summertime we split up, and I was mad. I was angry. And, what do you do when you're angry? You find the opposite type of person. And so, I found the opposite type of person than my wife, and that turned out to be an even worse relationship. And I very rarely talk about that, but that was devastating to me, to my children, to, to to everything that I was about.
You're nearing your anniversary. You're getting close to your anniversary is it March 9th?
Yeah.
2017.
Yep.
So you wake up and that's a shitty day.
Yeah. And I think everybody can resonate with that. You wake up, and March 9th was always like, I got it tattooed on me. March 9th was just a good day. It was always a good day. It was a reminder of like the wedding that we had, and the family, and the alcohol, and the dancing, and honeymoon. And I woke up that day and I'm like, man, this is gonna be a shitty day. And I go into work. I had a prostitution sting going on that day, and I get into the conference room, and we're briefing up. It's like 9 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden somebody knocks on the door and says, "Hey, Chief wants to see you." I'm like, "Damn, what does Brian want?" So I go down in the office, knock on the door. I'm like, "What's up, man?" He said, "Griff, have a seat." I sit down, and he said, "You know what today is, right?" Referring to what would have been my 15-year wedding anniversary. I said, "Yeah." He said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm good." No, he said, "Are you straight?" I said, "I'm good." He said, "Griff, I'm gonna ask you again." He said, "If you're not mentally prepared, you're not physically ready. You're leading a lot of things going on out here. If you're not good today, it's fine. It's okay. Let me comp you out for the day, and I'll have somebody else lead the operation." I said, "Brian, I'm straight, man. I'm good. Today sucks, but I'm all right." And he had this way of like raising an eyebrow. And so he raised the eyebrow, and he looked at me for about 10 more seconds. And I stood up. I said, "We good?" He's like, "Yep." The one thing I didn't say was, "How are you? Appreciate you checking on me on my worst day, but how are you doing? I know today may not be the best day for you too." I never got a chance to say that, and 2 hours later, Brian went home and shot and killed himself. And I eat that every day, to this day. You know, I always think to myself, like, why didn't I just say, "Hey, man, when we get done with this operation, let's go have a cold beer day tonight." You know, and I think that's paid me a lot of, I don't want to say dividends, but like when people check on me now, I always kind of realize that's an opportunity for me to also check on them. And I think that's one of the things that we don't do well is check on each other. You know, when an officer's involved in a shooting or a critical incident, we do a very good job checking on them, you know, for the first week or two. But do we remember the year anniversary? Do we remember the 6-month anniversary? Do we check on officers with loss of life calls, routine loss of life calls? Do we, you know, for me, and I think as we get into this, like from a suicide perspective, I think when we can deal with work, right? We're going to compartmentalize. We're going to do shitty things to make sure that we can get through work. But when we go home, we want home to be a solace for us, a temple for us, a place that we can go and recharge our batteries. It's when home falls apart that I feel like people are very at risk. And I've seen this as I traveled around and I've talked to a lot of people. I think that when the combination, whether it's divorce, whether it's, you know, a domestic situation or whatever have you, custody battle, something that happens at home combined with the amount of trauma that we see, like that's what raises the level to put you at a point where like there is no hope. And
I appreciate you sharing that tip, you know, because we want to provide officers with strategies of like what are signs.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking, do you think Chief Brian, when he was asking you how you're doing, do you think he was trying to create a conversation with you?
I do. I think he knows that I got it because I came from it. I think he was calling me in to check on me because he cared, but I think he also wanted to have a conversation. But Brian was a very strong man person, like just very, very prideful person, just, you know, something that everybody looked up to. And I think he was waiting for me to open the door, and I didn't. And I think, and I don't know, you know, if that, I mean, all it took was a conversation for me to save my life. So, you know, how could I say that my conversation wouldn't have helped him?
I think it's a good strategy, Griff, that you're sharing, that if someone's home life has fallen apart, you know, they don't have that foundation to go back to recharge.
Right. And it's constant turmoil, constant chaos, right? You have chaos at work, and then you go home to constant chaos. Whether it's a divorce, whether it's money. I remember when I was going through my divorce, man, my phone would ding, and I'll get sick to my stomach because that ding, that email ding, could potentially be an email from my attorney. Physically sick to my stomach. And you combine those two environments, right? A home life that is constant turmoil and chaos and you know,
fight or flight everywhere,
and you're just, you know, you're so hyper vigilant on every aspect that it's just not a way to live, and you start losing hope that this is the only way that it can be. And that's, you know, I lost hope. And, you know, like I said, 2 hours later, Brian went home and shot and killed himself. And as you can imagine, my world spiraled out of control. I felt responsible. I felt like I could have saved him. But, you know, I think I also started to really kind of deep dive into my own trauma. And I started to kind of like, well, Brian, you know, like they say, like suicide is contagious. And I don't know if it's contagious, but I think people that are struggling with trauma or PTSD, they start to rationalize why and how we go about doing it, and that's what my brain did. And one of the other lessons that I would tell everybody is that I didn't look at suicide as suicide. I looked at suicide as a sacrifice, and that was from Brian. But that was the trauma. That was the PTSD in my brain changing how I felt about it. Because again, I wasn't going to commit suicide because committing suicide is weak. But sacrificing my life for the betterment of my children, for my community, for my ex-wife, for my family, that's something that I could get behind. And once that little devil on my shoulder said, yeah, that's what you're doing, you're sacrificing yourself, that's what I was able to get behind. And that whole week, leading up until March 17th was just a nightmare. I mean, it just so much turmoil. And I remember getting to March 17th, and I made the decision that morning that I was going to end my life tonight. And I know it sounds silly to say, but it was peaceful. I remember, like, I didn't have to deal with the day's issues. I didn't have to deal with finances. I didn't have to deal with custody. I didn't have to deal with, any of the shit. Like, my divorce was finalized, but it was only finalized about 2 months.
You woke up in a really good mood.
Yeah.
Do you think somebody would have noticed that?
Yeah.
Could have?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of more signs that...
Yeah, and again, like, I never say to anybody, like, all the signs, right? Like, because we're gonna question, when somebody takes their own life, we're gonna question why we didn't take those signs. And that's not what I want people to do. What I want people to take away from what I'm saying is don't be scared to ask somebody if they're okay, right? And I want anybody else here to know that it's okay to not be okay. And I don't know who coined this phrase. I don't know if I coined this phrase, but I love, it's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to stay that way. And once we realize that you're not going to be okay in this profession. If you're going to be a first responder or defender in any way, shape, or form, you're not going to be okay. There's going to be many days that you're not going to be okay, but just don't be okay staying that way. And realize that that's part of the process and the journey of what your career looks like. And, and don't be scared to ask somebody. If anything populates, right? Think about my last 6 months. I lost my wife. I had nowhere to sleep. I was crashing on a buddy's couch. I had financial issues. I was going through a divorce. I have the anniversary, and now I have, one of my best. All of those enough, like, that's enough to say, hey, Griff, are you okay? Hey, man, I want to tell you that I love you. And that's what I want people to take away from it. Whether you see the signs, the signs are going to be there from somebody struggling, but just don't wait to say, hey, man, I'm checking in on you. I want you to know that you're not alone. That's what saved my life. But, that night, March 17th, I decided that midnight was going to be it. And there's something there's something strong about the zeros on the clock, just from the military. And it was almost kind of like a final countdown, if that makes sense. And so I wrote my suicide note, and, I still have my suicide note in my brain right now. I mean, I think about it. I think about it a lot. And, it's the first paragraph is, to my sons. I know you won't understand. You're my light in bad times and my sunshine every morning. And it goes on for 2 more paragraphs. I talk about some of the shitty things in my life, and the full suicide notes in my book. But I just remember sitting in my Yukon, and I was facing off into this wood. I was at 100 Washington Street, and I started listening to the music of my life. And I've always been very musically inclined. I love to dance. I love to sing. I'm not good at either, but I started listening to the music that reminded me of high school, like Tracy Chapman and Blink-182 and the Navy and everything else. And I have my phone on Do Not Disturb. I have my gun right there with me, and I'm just kind of thinking about who was going to find me and what it was going to mean to them, and how my boys were going to move forward, and and trying to I was playing this battle in my head, this is a good thing. This is a good thing. You're failing them. Stop failing them. This is success for them. And this war was being played over my head, and this is a good thing. This is a good thing. This is what they need. They need you. They need you. Bye. They need to be with their mother. You need to stop failing them. You can't make any more bad decisions. You can't make any more failures. And like I said, my phone was on Do Not Disturb, and all of a sudden it rang. And I remember it was about 11:15 at night, and all of a sudden it rang, and I looked down at it, and I'm like, holy shit. And it scared me. And so I picked it up and I answered it, and it was my buddy Ben. And he said, Griff, what are you doing? He said, I've been trying to get a hold of you all day. I said, nothing, bro. I said, what's up? He said, why don't you come over and have a beer, man? It's St. Patty's Day. Why don't you come over and have a cold one? I said, man, I got something I got to take care of tonight. How about tomorrow? Why don't I pop over tomorrow, man? We can talk. We can chop it up. And I think he heard something in my voice because he's not a very I love you type person. He's not a very like emotional type person. Like we always joke, like you hug me, I'm gonna hug you back, right? You hug Ben, and he's gonna freeze up. And he said, Griff, hey man, before I let you go, let me tell you two things. He said, first I want to tell you that you're a great dude. You're a good cop, you're a good father, you're a good friend, and I love you. I said, I love you too, bro. Appreciate that. And he said, number two, I want to tell you that there's light at the end of the tunnel. I know you're struggling. I'm struggling too. But I want you to know that we're in this together. And I'm going to be there for you, and you're not alone. And I remember the way that hit me. You know, for the first time in a little bit of time, I don't know how long, but I finally felt like I had a glimmer of hope. Just a shimmer of hope, like I'm going through this with somebody. It reminded me of Adam at Search and Rescue School. Hey man, just make it to Wednesday. And all of a sudden I made the best decision of my life. I said, you know what, man, I am going to come over. And I decided today's a good day to die, so is tomorrow. And I pushed my suicide off. I said, I'm not going to push it off a week. I'm going to push it off to tomorrow. But I'm going to go over and have a beer, and I'm going to talk to my buddy. And I went over and I talked to him. Then on March 18th, I woke up, and I went through the day. I said, if today's a good day to die, so is tomorrow. And I pushed it off to March 19th, to March 20th, March 21st, 22nd, 23rd. And every day I kept saying, if today's a good day to die, so is tomorrow. And I kept moving my suicide off one more day, one more day, and one more day. And then I didn't need to do that anymore. Then I decided that I was going to do something just a little bit to better myself. Sometimes it was get out of bed. Sometimes it was go to the gym. Sometimes it was start a project. Sometimes it was whatever it was. I just wanted to do something good for that day. And at nighttime, when I laid down in my bed, I wanted to say, what did I do that was good for me today? How did I make myself a little bit better today? And I did that for the better part of about 6 months. Sometimes it was push-ups. So I'd get in bed and I'm like, you know what? I didn't do shit today. And so I'd roll out of bed. I'd get my fat ass out of bed and I'd rep out like 50 push-ups. And I get back in bed and that was my good deed. But every day I had that and I loved that. And then I changed it to the model that I live with every single day today, to this day. And that's it. Every single day I find an opportunity in that 24 hours that I'm alive on this planet to do something good for somebody else. And I never tell anybody what that is. And, you know, I was able to do it last night before it struck midnight. And, you know, my heart just becomes full from that. And I love that. And I don't do it for anybody else. I know this sounds stupid. It helps me so much to do something good for somebody else. And that, real talk, that hope that I get from looking throughout my course of my day to find an opportunity to do something good comes back to me tenfold. And so I started journaling at nighttime before I go to bed. I didn't journal last night, but I journal before I go to bed, and I write down what the good deed was that I did, whether it's a text message or a phone call, whatever it is for that day. And it doesn't have to be, people are like, oh, I gave somebody 100. You don't have to do that. Just find somebody that you feel like you want to say something to and say, hey, I just want you look good today, man. You want you to know that I care about you. Or do what Ben did. Send a text, make a phone call. Hey, I love you. I know you're struggling. I know you're struggling in life right now, but I want to let you know that you're not alone. Whatever it is. And then write it down at night and watch how it comes back to you tenfold. And I started to document how it's come back to me tenfold. I mean, look where we're at today.
Gratitude.
I'm in Greenville, South Carolina, being interviewed by somebody that I respect so much because of just goodness. You know, goodness always finds goodness. And that's what I want to say to everybody is there's science behind it. In law enforcement and first responders, we're generally very negative. F this, F that, blah, blah, blah. You know, we see a lot of shit all the time. And when shit finds other shit, but goodness always finds other goodness. And there's science behind it. It's called neuroplasticity. Neurons that fire together, they wire together. So again, you seek and you're going to find it. And so if I seek out goodness, because I'm looking for it and I'm trying to find an opportunity to be good for somebody else or to do good, goodness always comes back to me tenfold. You know, and it's just amazing how that works. And I implore anybody, try it just one time. Today, find an opportunity inside of this 24-hour block that the moment that you listen to this, make a decision in the next 24 hours. By midnight of the time that you watch this podcast, do something unexpectedly good for somebody else. And then over the next week, watch how that comes back to you tenfold. And I promise you, it's a game changer in life.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest blessings of everything that I've gone through is that my kids know that it's okay to struggle. And, you know, I'm a perfect example of struggling and coming back. And, you know, not every day is perfect. You know, there's better days than others, but I can promise you that every day I know that I can make it to the end of that day. And I know that there's a plan in place for me, and I'm good with the plan, and I'm happy with the plan, and I've given, you know, I've put my faith in, you know, in my Savior, but I also am just so proud of what my boys have become. And they've watched that it's okay. I've got an autistic son, and I've watched the challenges that he's gone through in his life. And I can't sit here and complain. You know, I can't sit here and say, man, woe is me. No, nope, not a chance. Watch what this young man has done. You know, and how he's back at the middle school, and he's, you know, on the track team, and he's playing chess at a level that is ridiculous. It's phenomenal. I mean, he's used what God has given him, and he started to change the way he looked at autism. He doesn't look at autism as a negative anymore. He looks at it as a positive. And that's what I want people to hear, is that we all have obstacles, but take those obstacles and turn them into an opportunity. What your condition is right now does not have to be the conclusion to your story. You know, we got to the conclusion of my story in chapter 4, and then everything else that came along with it is all being open to the goodness that comes along and that flows from it, you know?
Griff, throughout your book, you talk about your faith. You've mentioned a couple times here. Can I ask you, there was Benny Jr., was his father named Ben?
Yeah.
And the guy who called you, his name is Ben?
Ben. Is that crazy?
Well, I'm reading the book, and it was hard for me to follow. I was thinking, man, there's a lot of Benjamins in this book.
I know. And, you know, I never put those two and two together. I never put Benny Jr. and his dad in the same. I never put those two together because those are just two completely different, you know.
Well, I want to tell you what I looked at yesterday. And I don't read the Bible. I grew up Catholic, and we were told, you don't read the Bible. The priest reads the Bible, and he'll tell you what's in it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what to think.
Yeah. And so, but I did some research on the name Benjamin. Do you know what it means?
No.
It's from the book of Genesis, and I think you should read about it. There's a story about Jacob and his wife Rachel, and they have a son named Ben-Oni. And Rachel names the son after she's told she's going to die. And so Ben-Oni is this life of sorrow is the meaning. But after Rachel dies, Jacob changes Ben-Oni's name to Benjamin, which is strength, his right arm. And so the name Benjamin in the book of Genesis is life after death.
Come on.
And I read that, and I thought, that's incredible that this guy's got this name Benjamin throughout his life.
And here, you know, one of my favorite Bible verses I got from Marcus Luttrell, and it's Galatians 2:20, which is, I am no longer alive. I'm messing it up, but I'm a new person. I'm reborn in Christ, and I let go of a lot of the mistakes I've had, a lot of the failures that I've made, because I know that I can't take anything from God's time. And God had a plan for me, and He had a purpose for me, and He's got a purpose for me today and I'm okay with where He puts me today and where He puts me tomorrow. And if tomorrow's my last day on this planet, I'm okay with that. He's given me the ability to have, you know, I say that I live on borrowed time because He didn't have to have Ben give me a phone call. And so my you know, I always call it my born day is March 17th. So I was born again on March 17th. And it may not be like, you know, the faith aspect of it, but like my born again day, and every day that I get from there is a blessing. And I'm going to treat those days as such. And
I started this conversation with the fact that 30,000 veterans have killed themselves who were part of the GWAT, compared to 7,000 in combat. I'm not even sure how many police officers, but I know it's the number one killer of police.
Yep.
And so, you know, we met, and I heard your story, and I wanted to get you on here and talk about it because I go around to a lot of police departments and they all say officer wellness. Oh yeah, it's a big priority. And then I ask a lot of questions about what are you doing about it specifically?
Yeah.
And I can see it's still a stigma, it's still a problem. Nobody raises their hand.
Yeah.
And I thought, I know that you've saved lives today.
I hope.
Griff, I know you have.
I hope, brother.
Your story is powerful, and especially your techniques and your strategies and advising folks to just bite that elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah. I mean, we all know somebody that's struggling. Think about it today. Anybody that's listening to this, you know somebody that's struggling. That they just went through a shooting. They're going through a divorce. They whatever. Just
pediatric fatalities.
Yeah. Just send a text. Say I love you. I care about you. You know, if we can multiply that from this sit down. I mean, think about the number of lives that we can save, and I truly believe that. And you know, I don't have a lot of money, but I have time, and my time that I give to everybody else is all I ask in return is that you just find somebody else that you can build into. And if we keep doing that, like that's, I wore my 10%er shirt today because that's what a 10%er is. We believe in the responsibility that we take as guardians of other people, and so we have an obligation. When we ask somebody how they're doing, we want the answer. We don't want them to say fine. We don't want them to say I'm good. When I ask you, and my friends know this, when I text you and I say status check or how are you today, or when I call you, pick up the phone and we're going to talk. And if you say fine, know that feelings and need of expression is what fine means, and we're going to have those feelings, and it's okay, and it's going to be a conversation between us. And I may not have the best words for you, but you're going to know by the end of that I'm there for you and that I love you.
I appreciate that, Griffin. I know you're the real deal because I know you put your cell phone out there, and I know people have called you.
Yeah.
I think you were telling me, so you were just sharing before the camera started that somebody had called your phone.
Yeah.
I want to know if you would just pick it up.
Yeah. My boy Bert from Montana. So Bert's listening, matter if I was making dinner and my phone rang. It was a Montana number, and it was actually a potential spam. I don't know why, but I picked it up, and he goes, wow, damn. I said, hello? He said, man, you actually picked up your phone. And I said, yeah. I said, that's my, if my phone is next to me and the phone rings, I'm going to answer it. Because he said, man, I'm just struggling a little bit. Right now. And I just need to talk. And honestly, I just wanted to see if you pick up your phone. And we developed a friendship now. It's been, every week we kind of send each other a little message, man, status check, how you doing? He's on the other side of the country and I'm on this side of the country. And, Bert's listening. He knows that I care about him and that, and I know that he cares about me. I know if I call Bert right now, he would pick up the phone, and I know that for a fact. And he knows too that if he calls me, right, I'm going to pick up the phone and and if I don't, I'm going to call him right back. The moment I can possibly call him back, I'm going to call him back. And I've got a conglomerate of guys that I call 10%ers that I know you call, I show. And I love that. You call, I answer. And I mean that. I mean that wholeheartedly. So there's a lot of time left on this planet for us to do good, and it doesn't take a long time to just say, hey, I care about you and I love you. So.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Griff.
Yeah, man.
You call me, I'll pick up too, brother.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, bro.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you very much. Oh, man.